You're not fit to be Premier of the Victoria. As I said before, clear warning, you need to leave. You should need to flee Victoria while you can. If you think you're ever going to be able to live and remain in Victoria even after you're Premier, which your days are numbered, like you won't be Premier for that much longer, because it's only a matter of a week or two away where Victorians are going to storm your residence and drag you out, and God knows what's going to happen to you, but I don't think anyone's going to show any sympathy to you. They do the same things to you that you've done and had the police force violently do to innocent Victorians. You should leave and flee like you've had your family apparently allegedly flee to Queensland. I can say, Dan Andrews, it's not safe for you to flee anywhere in Australia. You need to go back to your masters in China and try and seek protection from the Chinese Communist regime. The people you answer to, or maybe billionaire George Soros has a spare house to hide you in, because we do not like traitors or people that are treasonous to our country. And let me make it clear, you need to leave. Victorian Police, we're going to have you charged, arrested, when the new global system comes into power. We're not going to tolerate your behaviour. You swear an oath to be loyal to the Australian people, and now the way you're treating them is simply not called for. Over a virus that might be real, and we know it's real, no doubt, because it's made in a lab. It has its patent number, so it's pretty easy to confirm if it's real. But Plan B, worst case scenario, if the Australian government does not represent the Australian people or the state premiers, then they need to be removed. Now, we need to remove them by a referendum or an election, or if things get really bad, we have to start looking at Plan B. We don't want to have to focus on there. We want to be able to change it, but you don't want to be like some people in history that left it too late when they had no ability to defend.
A self-proclaimed successful businessman who sort of burst on the scene in local parts after having gone away and made his fortune. And he came back with the story that he had millions and millions of dollars and he really hated Tony Windsor, and what he wanted to do was start a 21st century Australia political party, and he was going to stand for election and he was going to defeat Tony Windsor because Tony Windsor was nothing but a closet greenie. He claimed to have made all his money through 21st century education, which ran seminars and charged people a lot of money to come and hear Jamie McIntyre's stories about how to get rich quick. They were lavish seminars, and one of them he even paid Arnold Schwarzenegger to fly out to Australia and give a 1-hour speech at. At the time, my theory was that his businesses were suffering a cash flow crisis, but following the global financial collapse, there weren't enough cashed up grey nomads who wanted to go and invest in a get-rich-quick scheme. And I figured that he was throwing his last possible access to credit at jumping ship from commercial enterprise into a political enterprise. And it seems to have turned out to be the case, because 21st century Australia polled so badly here in his home electorate that he didn't even get paid for his first preference votes. And then Jamie McIntyre kind of went quiet for a couple of years until 2015, when he made the local newspaper again in August and in October. And then, finally this week, it came to a conclusion of sorts, the first round anyway. Okay, so 20th of August 2015. One-time runner for the seat of New England and head of the 21st Century Business Group, Jamie McIntyre has come under fire after allegations he has been unlawfully carrying on unlicensed financial service businesses. Investigator watchdog ASIC, Australia Securities and Investment Commission, announced last week that it had filed action against the former Glen Innes man with regard to 5 land banking scheme properties in Victoria and Queensland. National Senator John Williams quizzed ASIC on Friday on the legality of providing unlicensed financial advice to consumers. Mr. Williams said there were 2 issues that he was concerned with, namely that of real estate agents advising investors to take on self-managed super funds prior to investing in property, and that of the land banking controversy surrounding McIntyre and the 21st Century Group. They're 2 separate issues, Mr. Williams said. I raised with ASIC on Friday that it had been brought to my attention that real estate agents in some places are advising people to pull out their superannuation and put it in a self-managed super fund and then selling them an investment property, a house or a unit or something. For someone to give you financial advice on your super, they have to be a registered financial planner. He said providing unlicensed financial advice carried hefty penalties, including fines and jail time. It is a minority who are telling people to get out of their superannuation fund and put it in a self-managed super fund, and they will sell them a property, he said. As far as Jamie McIntyre goes, that's called a land banking scheme. They might come up to you and say, give us $30,000. We've bought a big piece of land, and when it's approved for subdivision, you take your choice of the blocks. And the allegations are that the land never gets developed, and the $30,000 goes. According to Saturday's report in Sydney Morning Herald, McIntyre's 21st Century Business Group has been implicated in the loan banking schemes that have reportedly hit figures upwards of $100 million over the past 5 years. ASIC has announced there are over 100 investors in 5 schemes in Victoria and Queensland, which have been promoted to investors through 21st Century Group seminars. I'm not saying that Jamie McIntyre is involved in shonky schemes. We'll let the courts decide on that. But usually they target mums and dads, retirees who have perhaps sold their business, often lifetime savings, and they see their money gone, Senator Williams said. Followed a month later by McIntyre faces liquidation. 2 months later. PPB Advisory have issued a recommendation to liquidate a company connected to former Glen Innes man Jamie McIntyre and his collapsed land banking scheme. The company, Midland capital H small W Y. I'm going to call that highway, but that's not what's written here. Midland, Hawaii, is behind a Bendigo project, Hermitage, which fell in July, leaving $25.5 million unaccounted for. Administrators say there are more than $22 million in inflated commissions, quote, shadow director, unquote, fees, and undocumented payouts from McIntyre's collapsed land banking scheme near Bendigo. PPB Advisory partner Nicholas Martin said their preliminary investigations have revealed that of the $24 million invested in the scheme, just $1.7 million has been spent on the planning and development of the project. While all option fees also appear to have been spent, the majority have not been applied to activities relating to the development of the land, he said. It is likely that Midland has been insolvent from March 2012. That's before Jamie McIntyre stood for election, as I said. Cash flow crisis, spend your last access to credit on getting into politics. It's likely that Midland has been insolvent from March 2012 and potentially as early as September 2011. We recommend creditors vote to place Midland Hawaii into liquidation, as this will enable further examination of the company's failure and the actions of its directors and related parties, and ultimately provide an opportunity to maximise the prospect of a return to investors. Mr McIntyre is linked to a number of schemes, now the subject of inquiries by the Senate and corporate regulators, involving investors initially paying thousands in fees to for get-rich training by McIntyre's 21st Century Education and another firm, Market First. PPB also found almost $12 million was paid in above-market commissions, with about $4.6 million going to a business linked to a, quote, shadow director, unquote, Michael Grochowski, Grochowski, a key player in the land banking ventures. This is a very unfortunate situation for Midland Hawaii investors, Mr Martin said. Up to $22.3 million of payments from Midland's bank accounts have been identified as likely to be voidable transactions or other potential claims which should be investigated by a liquidator. Creditors will vote on PPB Advisory's proposals on Wednesday, October 21. And they voted to liquidate. And that brings us to Tuesday, 25th of October 2016's paper, wherein the self-acclaimed, stunningly successful entrepreneur turned political wannabe has had the smile wiped right off his face. Or so it seems to me. The federal court has banned locals Jamie and Dennis McIntyre from managing corporations and from carrying on financial services for a period of 10 years each. The court has declared that land banking developments operated by the McIntyres were unregistered managed investment schemes in a decision delivered by Justice Bromwich on October 17, 2016. Justice Bromwich handed down the decision due to the McIntyres being officers of companies that had failed by being wound up and which had also contravened the Corporations Act. ASIC commenced proceedings in August 2015 against Jamie and Dennis McIntyre and the 21st Century Land Banking Companies in relation to their promotion and sale of interests to investors in 5 land banking schemes. ASIC Commissioner Greg Tanzer said the high banning periods ordered by the court in this case are necessary to protect the public from those who are officers of companies that contravene the Corporations Act. It also serves as a warning to those involved in unlawful, unregistered managed investment schemes, including those that involve land banking, that ASIC will take action, he said. Jamie and Dennis McIntyre agreed to the banning orders made against them, but Dennis said they did try and rectify any issues with ASIC once they became aware of them. Quote, "What we eventually took the bans over, we did try and rectify with ASIC by retrospectively licensing the developments. But they weren't interested in that," unquote, he said. Shit, I wonder why. That'd be like getting caught driving without a licence and asking the cops if they'd give you a retrospective licence, wouldn't it? Quote, "We did have legal advice that said they weren't managed investment schemes, but the law is very broad, so for an inadvertent breach, we settled for a fairly hefty punishment." Continuing the quote, "We offered to sell the developments if we could maintain control of the companies and then refund all the investors 100% of their money, and we had offers of more than we paid, which would have given us sufficient funds to carry out those refunds, but ASIC had no interest in letting us do that," unquote, because they'd been trading insolvent for 3, perhaps 4 years when they were first caught. Mr. McIntyre said that all the investors in the developments had security over the land. Quote, "We had measures in place to protect our investors, so from our perspective, any losses only occurred due to the inadvertent breach and we believe ASIC's actions." Quote, "We have set up a fund so that investors can be assured they won't take any losses. 21st Century Group Proprietary Limited, based in Sydney, is not associated with the McIntyres or their businesses." So that's either been sold off or hived off or stuck in a trust fund or put in a solicitor's bottom drawer or something else has happened to it. But 21st Century Education was coming under a lot of scrutiny by the regulatory authorities in Queensland in particular. They ripped a lot of money out of a lot of pensioners. And I always wondered, where's he getting the money for that? How does he afford to pay $1 million to get Arnold Schwarzenegger to come out here and say, "You should listen to Jamie. He can tell you how to get rich. Look what he's done for me." Yeah, well, it was the land banking schemes that funded the 21st Century Education seminars. That's what covered his operating costs. What a devious little entrepreneur. How very cunning. And look what it's got him. He's not allowed to be a company director or a financial officer of anything. He's going to have to go back to being a shearer's assistant or something, whatever he was. You know, like what did they raise him to be when he grew up at Pinkett before he decided to go off and become a successful entrepreneur, a self-made man, a multi-millionaire in his dreams? And I personally believe that there's a deep, bitter, painful character flaw in individuals who are driven to promote themselves and to lie about how good they are. I don't know why they're suffering from such a throbbing, pulsating, overcompensated inferiority complex, but it ruins them. They look good for a while when they're in the early ascending phases before people wake up to them.